first thing I noticed when I woke up wasn't the blood on my pillow, or the surgical scars running like railroad tracks down my arms and legs. It was the sound my bones made when I moved. A soft, musical chime, like wind through crystal caves. My name is Elena Vasquez, and 3 days ago I was still human. The mirror in my cramped quarters aboard the mining station Esperanza showed me a woman I barely recognized. Same dark hair, same brown eyes that had seen too much of the frontier's cruelty, but something fundamental had changed. When I tapped my knuckles against the metal bulkhead, they rang like tuning forks. When I walked, my skeleton sang a quiet symphony that only I could hear. Outside my porthole, the shattered remains of Kepler 442 hung in space like broken teeth. The terraforming had failed spectacularly 6 months back, leaving nothing but floating chunks of what used to be someone's dream of a new world. We miners had stayed behind to salvage what we could from the wreckage. Metals, rare earth elements, anything worth hauling back to the inner systems. Desperate work for desperate people. I tried to remember the last 3 days, but found only darkness where memories should be. The medical bay's logs showed I'd been admitted with severe structural injuries after a mining accident. The attending physician was listed as Dr. Chen, but I'd never heard that name before, and I knew everyone on this rust bucket of a station. The pain hit me then, not physical, but something deeper. A hollow ache that seemed to resonate through my new bones like a bell struck wrong. I pressed my palm against my chest and felt my ribs vibrate with a frequency that made my teeth ache. Someone had taken me apart and put me back together. The question was why. I dressed quickly, noting how my movements felt different now, more precise, like my joints had been calibrated by some master engineer. The sensation was unsettling, as if I were wearing someone else's body. My boots clicked against the deck plating, with a rhythm that didn't match my heartbeat. The corridors of Esperanza were quieter than usual. Most of the crew would be out on salvage runs, picking through the bones of the dead world below. The station groaned around me, its aging superstructure protesting the constant micro-impacts from debris. Through the observation windows, I could see the skeletal remains of Kepler 442c's cities, their twisted spires catching the light of the system's twin suns. Medical Bay 7 was at the far end of the residential section, past the hydroponics labs and the chapel where Padre Miguel held services for anyone desperate enough to still believe in something. The bay's door stood open, unusual for a facility that should have been sealed and sterile. Inside I found chaos. Equipment lay scattered across the floor like the aftermath of a tornado. Surgical tables were overturned, their restraint systems torn apart as if by superhuman strength. Blood stained the walls in arterial sprays, already browning in the recycled air, but no bodies. Whatever had happened here, the evidence had been cleaned up with professional thoroughness. I knelt beside an overturned cabinet and found a datapad. Its screen cracked, but still functional. The last entry was dated 3 days ago, logged by Dr. Chen at 2347 station time. Subject exhibits remarkable adaptation to the synthetic bone matrix. Neural integration proceeding ahead of schedule. The resonance frequency is stable at 440 Hz. Perfect pitch, as requested. Recommend immediate extraction of the payload before full consciousness returns. Note: subject's pain tolerance suggests prior military conditioning. Exercise extreme caution during final phase. My hands shook as I read the words again. payload. They'd put something inside me, hidden it within my artificial skeleton. But what? And why me? A shadow fell across the doorway, and I looked up to see Jake Morrison, the station's head of security. He was a big man, built like a freight hauler, with scars on his knuckles that spoke of a violent past. His hand rested casually on the plasma pistol at his hip. "Elena," he said, his voice carrying the slow drawl of the outer colonies. "Heard you were up and about. How you feeling?" "Like I've been taken apart and reassembled," I said, standing slowly. My bones chimed softly with the movement. "Funny thing is, I can't remember much about the accident." Jake's eyes narrowed slightly. "Memory loss ain't uncommon with head trauma. Doc Chen mentioned you took quite a tumble down in the processing center. Where is Dr. Chen? I'd like to thank him for the excellent work." "Gone," Jake said too quickly. "Finished his contract and shipped out yesterday on the Meridian. Shame, really. Good doctor." I nodded, filing away the lie. The Meridian hadn't docked at Esperanza in over a week. I'd checked the traffic logs on my way here. Whatever had happened to Dr. Chen, he hadn't left voluntarily. "Well," I said, "guess I should get back to work. These salvage quotas won't meet themselves." Jake stepped aside to let me pass, but I caught the way his eyes tracked my movements, cataloging every step. He knew something was different about me, just as I did. The question was whether he was part of whatever conspiracy had carved me up, or just suspicious of my miraculous recovery. I made my way to the salvage bay, where my mining exosuit hung in its maintenance cradle like a mechanical scarecrow. The suit was a Titan-class heavy lifter, designed for the brutal work of tearing apart dead worlds. Its articulated arms could crush steel, and its fusion torch could cut through 6 feet of reinforced concrete. More importantly, it was equipped with deep-range sensors that could detect anomalies in metal composition. I climbed into the suit's cockpit and initiated the startup sequence. The neural interface connected with a soft click, and suddenly I could feel the suit's systems as extensions of my own body. But something was different now. The connection felt deeper, more intimate than before. It was as if my new bones were conducting the suit's electrical signals more efficiently. I ran a full diagnostic on myself, using the suit's medical sensors. What I found made my blood run cold. My skeleton showed up on the scan as a complex lattice of synthetic materials: titanium alloy, carbon fiber, and something else. Something that registered as dense as lead, but with a crystalline structure I'd never seen before. The foreign material was concentrated in my rib cage, formed into a perfect sphere about the size of a marble, a data core. Someone had turned me into a walking storage device. I tried to access the core through the suit's interface, but it was encrypted beyond anything in my technical repertoire. Whatever information was locked inside my chest, it was valuable enough to justify major surgery and multiple murders, the kind of secret that started wars or ended them. The comm system crackled to life, startling me from my thoughts. "Elena, this is Control. We've got a priority salvage request from the surface. Sector 7 Alpha, coordinates following." Sector 7 Alpha was deep in the ruins of New Babylon, the colony's former capital. It was dangerous territory, where the failed terraforming had left pockets of toxic atmosphere and unstable gravity fields. Most salvage crews avoided it, unless the payoff was extraordinary. "Copy that, Control. What's the target?" "Corporate facility. Pre-war construction." Client is paying premium rates for discreet recovery of specific items. Corporate facility. Pre-war. The pieces were starting to fit together before the terraforming disaster. Kepler 442c had been home to several major research installations, black sites where the big corporations conducted experiments too dangerous for civilized space. If someone was willing to pay premium rates for salvage from one of those facilities, it meant they were looking for something specific, something worth hiding inside a woman's ribcage. I sealed my suit and cycled through the airlock into the vacuum of space. The debris field stretched out before me like a three-dimensional graveyard, chunks of planet tumbling slowly in the weak gravity of the system's asteroid belt. My suit's thrusters fired in controlled bursts, pushing me toward the largest fragment, a piece of continental crust that still held the twisted remains of New Babylon. The city had been beautiful once, I'd heard. Gleaming towers that scraped the artificial sky, parks filled with earth plants that had somehow learned to thrive in alien soil. Now it was a maze of collapsed buildings and shattered dreams, its atmosphere long since boiled away into space. I landed on what had been the financial district and activated my suit's ground penetration radar. The coordinates led me through streets filled with the detritus of failed civilization. Overturned vehicles, their fusion cells long since depleted. Storefronts with their windows blown out by explosive decompression. Children's toys scattered like confetti in the airless ruins. The corporate facility was buried under a collapsed apartment complex, its entrance sealed by tons of reinforced concrete. I fired up my fusion torch and began cutting through the debris, the superheated plasma turning solid matter into vapor. My new bones resonated with the torch's frequency, creating a harmonic that was almost musical. It took 3 hours to clear the entrance. Behind the debris, I found an airlock that had somehow maintained its seal. The facility's emergency power was still active, fed by a fusion reactor buried deep in the bedrock. Red warning lights blinked in the darkness like malevolent eyes. I cycled through the airlock and found myself in a sterile corridor that could have been lifted from any corporate research facility in the galaxy. Except for the bodies. They lay where they'd fallen, preserved by the facility's atmosphere scrubbers. Men and women in lab coats and security uniforms, their bodies showing signs of violence. Plasma burns, projectile wounds, the aftermath of a desperate firefight. Whatever had happened here, it hadn't been an accident. I followed the corridor deeper into the facility, my suit's lights cutting through the darkness. The walls were lined with laboratories and holding cells, their purposes obscured by clinical euphemisms. Biological Enhancement Division, Cognitive Restructuring Wing, Asset Integration Protocol. In the central laboratory, I found what I was looking for. Dr. Marcus Chen sat slumped over a computer terminal, a hole burned through his chest by a plasma rifle. His fingers were still touching the keyboard, frozen in the act of entering some final command. The screen showed a file directory labeled Project Songbird, dozens of folders containing research data, surgical procedures, and test subject profiles. My profile was at the top of the list. According to the files, I'd been selected as a test subject 6 months ago, long before the mining accident that had supposedly damaged my bones. The accident had been staged, a cover story to explain my disappearance while they performed the surgery. They'd replaced my skeleton with a synthetic matrix designed to resonate at specific frequencies, turning my entire body into a biological tuning fork. But that wasn't the real purpose of the operation. Hidden within the synthetic bone matrix was a data storage system, a crystalline memory core capable of holding terabytes of information. They'd turned me into a living hard drive, a way to smuggle sensitive data off-world without detection. The data itself was a revelation that made my hands shake as I read it. Project Songbird wasn't just about biological enhancement. It was about weaponization. The research files contained detailed plans for synthetic organisms, artificial life forms designed to terraform planets by consuming existing ecosystems. The failure of Kepler 4042c hadn't been an accident. It had been a field test, and now someone wanted the data back. I heard footsteps in the corridor behind me, and spun around to find Jake Morrison entering the laboratory, his plasma rifle trained on my chest. He wasn't alone. 3 other members of the security team flanked him, their faces hidden behind tactical visors. "Sorry, Elena," Jake said, his voice carrying genuine regret. "Nothing personal, just business." "Let me guess," I said, keeping my hands visible. "You're working for whoever funded this nightmare." "Meridian Corporation," Jake confirmed. "They've got a lot invested in terraforming technology. Can't have their trade secrets walking around in someone else's body. So you killed Dr. Chen and his team to cover your tracks." Chen got greedy. Started making demands, threatening to expose the project. Had to be dealt with. Jake's rifle never wavered. "Now we need what's inside you. The easy way or the hard way." I looked around the laboratory, calculating angles and distances. My mining suit was heavily armored, but plasma rifles could punch through military-grade plating at close range. I needed an advantage, something they wouldn't expect. That's when I remembered the resonance frequency. "You know," I said, taking a step closer to a bank of laboratory equipment, "there's something you should know about these synthetic bones." "Elena, don't make this harder than it needs to be." I smiled and struck my fist against the metal lab bench. The impact sent a pure, clear tone ringing through the facility, 440 hertz. Perfect pitch. Just as Dr. Chen had noted in his files. The sound was picked up by my skeleton and amplified, turning my entire body into a resonating chamber. The laboratory equipment began to vibrate in sympathy. Glassware shattered. Computer screens cracked. The facility's structural supports, already weakened by years of neglect, began to sing with harmonic stress. Jake fired, but I was already moving, my enhanced reflexes allowing me to dodge the plasma bolt by inches. I struck the wall with my shoulder, sending another resonant pulse through the facility's framework. Ceiling tiles began to rain down like snow. "The whole place is coming apart," one of Jake's men shouted. I hit the wall again, harder this time. The resonance built on itself, creating a feedback loop that turned the entire facility into a giant tuning fork. Support beams groaned. Bulkheads buckled. The fusion reactor's containment field fluctuated as its housing vibrated beyond tolerance. Jake tried to rush me, but a falling beam caught him across the shoulder, sending him sprawling. His rifle skittered across the floor, disappearing under a pile of debris. The other security men were already running for the exit, abandoning their leader to save their own lives. I grabbed Jake by his tactical vest and hauled him to his feet. "Who else knows about the data core?" "Elena, we need to get out of here!" The facility was shaking itself apart around us, its death throes accelerated by the harmonic resonance of my artificial bones. "Answer me!" Just Meridian's board of directors. The project was compartmentalized. Need-to-know basis. I released him and headed for the exit, my suit's thrusters firing to carry me through the collapsing corridors. Behind me, Jake stumbled through the debris, his face pale with fear. We reached the airlock just as the facility's fusion reactor went critical, its containment field finally failing under the stress of the resonant vibrations. The explosion lit up the ruins of New Babylon like a second sun, vaporizing what remained of the corporate facility and its dark secrets. Jake and I were thrown clear by the blast wave, our suits tumbling through the debris field like leaves in a hurricane. When the shockwave passed, I found myself floating in space above the ruins of a dead world, my bones still singing with the memory of the resonance. The data core in my chest had survived the explosion, its crystalline structure intact, but now I knew what it contained, and I had a choice to make. I could return to Esperanza and try to have the core surgically removed, risking my life in the process. I could try to sell the information to the highest bidder, becoming just another war profiteer in a galaxy full of them. Or I could do something else entirely. Jake's voice crackled over the comm system. "Elena, my suit's damaged. I need help." I looked at him floating helplessly in the void, his thruster pack leaking fuel into space. It would be easy to leave him here, to let the cold vacuum claim another casualty of corporate greed. But that would make me no better than the people who had carved me up and filled me with their secrets. Instead, I fired my thrusters and moved to intercept him. "Grab onto my suit. We're going home." "Why?" he asked as I pulled him close. "After what I did to you." "Because that's what separates us from them," I said, looking back at the fading glow of the explosion. "We still remember what it means to be human." The journey back to Esperanza gave me time to think. The data core in my chest contained information that could revolutionize terraforming technology, or weaponize it beyond imagination. In the wrong hands, it could be used to destroy entire ecosystems, turning living worlds into barren wastelands. But in the right hands, it might prevent such disasters from ever happening again. When we docked at the station, I made my decision. I transmitted the entire contents of the data core to every major news network in the galaxy, along with my own testimony about Project Songbird and Meridian Corporation's role in the Kepler 442c disaster. The story broke across civilized space like wildfire, sparking investigations and hearings that would topple governments and dissolve corporate empires. Jake was arrested by colonial authority investigators, but his cooperation in exposing the conspiracy earned him a reduced sentence. Dr. Chen's research team was posthumously honored for their sacrifice, their families compensated by the courts. Meridian Corporation collapsed within 6 months, its assets seized to pay reparations to the survivors of failed terraforming projects. As for me, the surgical removal of the data core was successful, though I chose to keep my synthetic bones. They'd become part of who I was now, a reminder of how far some people would go in pursuit of profit and power. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear them singing, a quiet melody that speaks of resilience and hope. I left Esperanza eventually, trading my mining suit for a small cargo ship and a license to haul freight between the outer colonies. It's honest work, carrying supplies to settlements on the edge of known space, helping people build new lives far from the corruption of the inner systems. Sometimes I think about the ruins of Kepler 442c, still tumbling through space like a monument to human hubris. But mostly I look forward, toward the next port of call, the next delivery, the next chance to do something good in a galaxy that often seems determined to tear itself apart. My name is Elena Vasquez, and I carry the songs of the dead in my bones. But I also carry something else, the knowledge that even in the darkest places, there are still people willing to stand up and fight for what's right. And sometimes that's enough to change everything.